It seems every reloader, new or experienced, is always looking for that one next upgrade. If you're new to reloading, it's very likely that your first upgrade should be a decapping die. The decapping die is kind of like the assembly line worker of your reloading process. It does a lot of the heavy lifting. It may even keep you out of trouble that you didn't know existed, and it can get absolutely none of the credit for the results that it helps produce. Decapping dies can start anywhere in the neighborhood of around $12, and whether you're using a single stage or a progressive, they can come in very useful. Now I have several different options to go over today, and I'll give you a different reason why you'd pick up one over another. But even if you've been reloading for a while, I've got a new option to go over that may be worth your time. It's a lot more interesting than I expected. Let me be perfectly clear. In most cases, you don't truly need a decapping die. Most sizing dies have a decapping pin integrated with a sizing die. In fact, many of the sizing dies come with spare decapping pins. Why? Because they break. The fact is, there are many reasons to buy a decapping die. They're very inexpensive, so almost everybody has one. But why? Because they're useful. After firing, the primer needs to be removed before you can resize and reload the case. The decapping die makes this process quick and efficient. There are at least 3 specific reasons you're going to want a decapping die, probably more. Dealing with crimped primers on military brass, processing small flash hole brass, and straight up keeping your dies cleaner and more reliable. Let's just break these down individually. When dealing with military brass, there are 2 enemies to your standard decapping pin, both crimped primers as well as Burdan primers, which can wreak havoc on any style of decapping pin. Now, crimp primers specifically take more effort to eject from your press, and it becomes more difficult to know if you're exerting excessive force if you're combining this with your sizing operation. Breaking these into 2 separate steps keeps any damage from this process not only on your cheaper die, but one that is also better designed to take that abuse. Replacement pins are relatively inexpensive, and performing this process just ensures that subsequent operations will have less problems. If you try decapping a Burdan prime case, you are certainly going to apply some force to something. Most of these decapping dies, if they run into a Burdan primer, let the rod harmlessly move out of the way, and they can be reset rather than breaking the pin and damaging your sizing dies. More in a second on this. But second, let's talk about dealing with small flash holes. The decapping pins included most dies very rarely have accommodations for small flash hole brass. So you'll actually need to remove the decapping pin from your resizing die altogether if you're going to be sizing premium brass. 6.5 Creedmoor, 3.8 Winchester, 6 PPC, probably others from Lapua, Peterson, etc. have options that use these smaller flash holes. I hate to spend money on high dollar brass and then wreck the flash hole by shoving a pin through it that's just too big. These smaller flash holes, which I think are in the ballpark of around 59 thousandths, versus a standard flash hole, which is around 80 thousandths. Personally, I remove the decapping pins from my dies whether I'm using an expander ball inside or not. But this is a decision specific to each reloader's process. The third reason for decapping your brass before sizing and cleaning is it can make your cleaning process more effective. Cleaning before sizing can help you keep your much more expensive sizing dies in better condition and keeping them usable longer. I try to keep Murphy out of my reloading process as much as possible. And if a problem happens anywhere on the die, I want it to happen on one I care the least about. Now personally, I prefer a wet tumbling process. This allows the extra primer residue to be cleaned out during that step. But when I put my cases in the brass dryer, I also never end up with a full case of water because they dry much faster because the primer has been removed. Another benefit of processing brass this way is since I pretty much universally remove my decapping pin from my dies, if you ever do something silly like I do and you find a case that didn't get sized enough, I can resize that case without actually having to knock out my live primer. Now I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever made this mistake, but it just happens to the best of us sometimes. Not having that decapping pin in just makes it easier. Let's walk through several of these options. I think they're all available at our channel sponsor, Midway USA, once you figure out which one is the best option for you. For clarity, you don't need any lube for this process, as it shouldn't touch the case, again, except to extract the primer. The basic of all basic of decapping dies is the decapping die from Lee. For a while, they didn't have an undersized pin, so if you were dealing with small flash hole brass, Lee wasn't an option at all. But they are now. I certainly don't want to be one to tell you how to spend your money. Lee does offer decapping pins separately from the die bodies themselves. However, I avoid changing out the pins if at all possible. These aren't very expensive, so I have a separate body for each size of decapping pin. Now it's not impossible to change them, just once I have the pin adjusted, I hate moving it. If you cause damage to the pins, you're going to want to change them. If not, you're going to start damaging that expensive brass if you continue to use the damaged pin. Now personally, I use my small pin only when dealing with premium brass exclusively. Lee tells us these decapping dies work with case diameters up to 0.560 inches in diameter, all the way up to 3.125 inches long, and in fact, I believe that's all the way up to basically 30-06. When I first started reloading 6.5 Creedmoor, the undersized pin for Lee's didn't exist, so I started looking into Redding decapping dies. Now this one specifically is for larger cases like 338 Lapua, and this one is for the small flash holes. But when it comes to the sturdiness of the decapping die, these aren't necessarily your best options. Don't get me wrong, these have worked very well for me, but the small pin has literally only been used on small flash hole brass exclusively. It hasn't seen any of the struggles that come from decapping military brass. And the larger one has only been for my 338 Lapua loads. So I've certainly used it, but it hasn't done the thousands of cases that my Lee has. Now there's a secret third option, so you don't have to choose between the Lee or the Redding. First, appropriate disclosure is required here. FW Arms did send me some of these decapping dies to try out. I liked them so much, I ended up picking some more of them here just so I can give you a full walkthrough. When I took these, I agreed to take a look, but made no promises they would ever show up. So I'm explaining these to you for very good reasons. Let's start off with their starter die. If you're looking for something inexpensive, this is their starter die option. They call it their simple universal depriming and decapping die. This can go all the way to 338 Lapua Magnum in their starter line. This die comes with 2 pins, one for small flash hole and one for large, to handle all your needs right out of the gate. And when we talk about cost, it's not a whole lot more money than the Lee. And if you add up all that comes with it, I think the extra quality and value that this die brings is going to be hard to deny as possibly the best starter option on the market. Not taking anything away from these Lee dies, but the decapping pins are much higher quality on the FW Arms, and it's way easier to, what's the right word? Tune the resistance needed to make the pin rise. With the Lee, if I run to a Burdan primer, I usually stop, and I feel the insane resistance. The FW Arms has a laser engraved mark on it, and you can kind of tune to get it exactly where you want it. I'm not telling anyone to throw away their dies that they already own, and if they work fine, that's great. But I think these only run close to $25. I don't know how they're hitting that price point with this type of quality level. Replacement pins are available, but each pen again has 2 ends. And then you get both sizes, small and large flash hole. And with the quality of these pins, I really think they're going to last you quite a while. When you start looking at other dies like the Redding, I don't know why you would pick that option over the FW Arms. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot longer life out of these FW Arms pins. They're just so much better quality. The next die in their lineup to go over, I really thought was going to be overrated, but I am wrong for multiple reasons. If you're spending a ton of time at your reloading bench and you're ever dealing with either a progressive press that gets jammed up with a primer that didn't eject fully, or you have cases that don't line up perfectly every single time and have the pin strike the case head and not the flash hole, you're going to want to take a look at this die. No more. This die uses different replacement pins, but it integrates a spring to flick those problem primers right into the spent pile with a clear, audible click. They are available in full or standard sizes, which I think they're a little bit more money. The standard size is around $65 right now, and the full that can do all the way up to 338 Lapua is $75. But these decapping dies come with an auto-centering tip, which makes it pretty much impossible to miss the flash hole. This die really has a lot of thinking behind it, and I think you're going to be hard-pressed to be disappointed in it. Probably a bigger deal than I'm making it, but the pins for this do kind of suck to change. I really wouldn't want to be swapping between pin sizes all that often, which could mean buying 2 of these if you want one for each size of flash hole. The process to change things uses Loctite, which does come with it, but I'm impatient. I'm kind of a set it and forget it kind of person, and I'm fully aware this is a first world problem. But if you ever had jam primers on your progressive press, this die is a godsend. And to be perfectly clear, after using the FW Arms regular standard one that they sent me, I bought my own to make sure I could cover all the cases I reload for. These really are a great decapping die if you can get over the increased cost. Now when you're trying to choose which one is right for you, if price is no object, the FW Arms decapping die is very hard to ignore. If you want to start out, their simple universal depriming decapping die has value here that's impossible to ignore. Now absolutely the cheapest possible to get started is Lee, but not by a whole lot. You're going to have to pick the option that's right to suit your application, but like I said, I picked up the FW Arms just so I could make sure I could decap everything to 338 Lapua. It really works great. At least at this time, all of these options are available at our channel sponsor, Midway USA. If you're always looking for upgrades and you want to see all the reloading tools that you're going to need that don't come in your reloading kit, check out this playlist right here. I hope this video helped you figure out the best options for you, and thanks for watching.